Fountain pens and inks. Obsession? Maybe. Welcome to Urban Ink Spot. My name is Janine, and today we're going to do the 8 more pen questions, which is a tag that was created on, I understand it to have been created on Simone's Discord, which is an offshoot of the original 8 pen questions created by Simone and Leanne Likes a few years ago. So let's get into it. The first question is, do you have different uses for different pens? And I would say absolutely. Now, I'm not the kind of person who typically inks up a lot of extra pens after I've decided what I'm going to be using in any particular month, because I kind of like to have what I consider to be a manageable number of pens inked at any given time. And any more than about 10 or 11 pens starts to get a little bit unwieldy for me. So I usually, although I'll be really honest, I have a little bit more than that inked right now. Some of them I'm finishing from previous months. But I usually do try to keep it at around 10 or less. And what I typically do is I think about what I'm going to need my pens for at any particular time in that month, and that's what I'll ink. And so it does speak directly to the different uses for those different pens. So there are 3 ways that I use my pens on a regular basis. The first one is work planning. And in that scenario, I'm usually looking for a finer nib, or I want to pair it with a fast drying ink. If I know I'm going to be doing a lot of planning in my planners where I'm moving from page to page across different months or days or weeks. And so for the work planning, I usually select that finer nib. But sometimes if I'm not doing a ton of work planning where I'm flipping between pages, sometimes if I am just jotting things down, I do like to have a broader nib with a really flowy ink, because that seems to spark creativity for me in my work planning days. So work planning is number 1. The second way that I use my pens is journaling. And in journaling, I usually reach for a medium nib, like a juicy, really well flowing nib, and an ink that also has a good flow. The only time I find that to be a problem is if I'm at the very end of a page and I have just laid down a bunch of ink and it takes a while to dry. Sometimes I have to hold my thoughts for just a moment while that page dries before I flip over. But for the most part, journaling is a juicy nib experience with a medium juicy nib for me. And then the third use that I have for my pens is I like to do a lot of tracking in a Hobonichi weeks, and I have a couple of different weeks that are in flight at any time within the year. And I'm usually looking in that instance for a nib that is a fine nib or some kind of a quick draw pen, usually a smaller size that will fit into that Hobonichi weeks. So for example, in one of my weeks, I have a Pilot Prera, and it fits pretty decently inside this pen loop on the Hobonichi weeks. And it's a smaller, easy to open pen. And it is a fine, and I can use this to make some quick notes throughout the day or the week or month or whenever I'm actually using that pen. Another pen that I have talked about for that exact purpose is a really narrow pen that I got from Muji that also, same thing, slots really nicely into this pen loop. It's not something that I would reach for just for a journaling session, but for the purpose of making quick notes in my Hobonichi weeks, this is something that I reach for a lot. So that's a finer nib, quick draw pen, also for use in my traveler's notebook. So let's jot this down. It is a yes, and it is work planning, and journaling, and we'll just call it tracking. And I'm going to say finer nib or really broad nib for the creative piece versus the flipping through the pages. For journaling, medium juicy. And for tracking, quick draw, fine nib, and it's smaller in size. Okay, question number 2. How do you choose the inks and pens you're going to use next? So what I typically do is I like to think about what I'm doing during the next month and decide if I need some finer points, and if so, how many. And if I don't have any like major planning things happening, for example, at the beginning of the year, I do a lot of strategic planning. The end of the year and the beginning of the year, I'm doing a lot of strategic planning in my work notebook. So I am flipping around on the monthly pages, the weekly pages, the daily pages in that Hobonichi A5 size cousin. And so I'm going to need, usually in that time, I'm going to need some finer points to make a lot of notes without smudging as I flip through the pages. But if I don't have anything major planning or brainstorming on the calendar, I actually gravitate more towards the gushers for that journaling piece. Now, what I used to do is I would make notes in my, or as I would be journaling, I would be writing with a pen or using a particular ink, and it would come to my mind that I would think, you know what, it would be really great if I paired this thing with that thing. So this ink with that pen, or this pen with that ink. And it would just be something that I would capture in my journal, but then I could never actually get back to those pages where I made those notes. So what I was finding then is that I would be, flipping through the pages of my casual journal, and I could never quite get back to that thought that I had about which ones I needed to pair together. So what I started to do is I started to use my ink tracker, and this is where I've swatched out some inks and I say what pen I've got it in. I also use this to document what is currently inked, and in the back I actually have started gravitating to these sticky notes where I've got a pen per page, but what you'll notice here is I've got a little sticky note that is a note to myself about maybe I need to try Mont Blanc Modena Red, for example, in my Pilot Vanishing Point, or in my Pilot Elite 95S, I've said maybe try Platinum Classics Forest Black, or maybe Deep Magenta in my Black Robin, whoops, I got that wrong here, Black Robin skateboard pen, or in my TWSBI Vac Mini, I've said maybe I want to put Aldous Huxley in here. So this is how I've been doing it recently, and this actually seems to work much better for me when I am choosing what I'm going to write with next. But if I don't have anything written on this page, I may just go through the the pens that I had previously inked and with which ink. Or I may look at, if I know I want to use a particular ink, maybe look at whichever pen that I use it in recently, and I may have made a little notation that I really enjoyed the pairing. So that's typically how it goes. I don't have a very large pen or ink collection, so this seems to work pretty well for me. And it's really more about, for me, also exploring what I want to use, but a lot of times it's really more about the feel and the vibe, about whatever sparks creativity or joy in the moment for whatever I'm reaching for. So here we will say, if no reason for fine nibs, then whatever I've previously marked as a pairing. And it's a lot about vibes. The next question is, which pen do you prefer for longer writing sessions? And in this question was actually easier than I thought it would be. I do find myself very much gravitating towards a TWSBI. And the TWSBI, most notably, has such a large ink chamber. So this is a TWSBI VAC 700R. And you can ignore the staining that I have on this cap. I had this inked up with a blue pen for a very long period of time, and it got a little bit messy in the cap, and I never really cleaned it. So it has continued to stay in the stained the pen. But this pen, this ink chamber is so large. And also the TWSBI is a very easy pen to hold. It's got a really nice balance in the hand. I don't usually post this pen, although you maybe could, but it seems like it's a little loose. So I don't usually post it. No need to really on this pen. The feel of this pen is, it's got a nice size, a nice weight to it. So it's a very nice, comfortable pen to hold. And so I do often like to use either this pen, or I will reach for my TWSBI Diamond 580, which right now I'm finishing a fill of Colorverse Shiny Black, which I still cannot seem to get enough of. But I think the TWSBI pens are affordable. The ink chamber is really great to have a lot of capacity. And I would definitely say a TWSBI, pretty much any TWSBI, I really enjoy. And plus, with the VAC pens, these ink chambers do seal off. So if I am taking a trip and I want to have a pen for journaling, but I don't want to have to worry about it leaking when I'm on a flight, and it fits well, it's flexible, and it fits well into how I'm using my pens pretty much for any writing session. So here we're going to say TWSBI, pretty much any TWSBI, but I'm going to call out specifically my VAC 700R and my Diamond 580, although the TWSBI Eco, always a very easy, nice choice here. What is your all-time favorite pen is question number 4. And this one was an easy choice for me, and it would be my Pilot Custom 74. And I have this in a medium nib that has been ground by Gina Salarino of Custom Nib Studio. This is a sentimental value pen for me. This pen has a ton of sentimental value for me. I picked this up at the Fountain Pen Hospital in New York City after trying a bunch of different pens in my price range that day. I was celebrating two things. I was celebrating my birthday, but also I had accepted a new job and I had just signed the offer letter that day. And so I went out and I double treated myself. And this one, you know, the writing experience is beautiful. It was within the price range that I was looking for. And then this was actually the first pen that I ever customized the nib on, and was super happy with it before, even happier with it now after I've had it modified. So here we will say the Pilot Custom 74. Question number 5. If you had to choose one nib size, what would it be? And this one is pretty easy for me. A lot of my pens are in this pen size. I always gravitate towards a medium nib because I just like a little bit of a broader, not super broad, although there is a place for a super broad nib in my collection, but pretty much I am gravitating towards a medium-sized nib. That is what makes up the majority of my collection. The next question number 6, what is your favorite nib grind? And this one is actually, it was kind of hard for me. So I started getting my nibs ground in January of 2024. So this is a very new experience for me. And I'd seen a few different people online who had gone through the process of getting a custom nib grind on their pen. And I just didn't really know that much about it. And I hadn't been to any pen shows. So it was a little bit challenging for me to think that I wanted to do that. But I ended up, like I said, this is the very first nib that I had ground, and it was ground by Gina Salarino of Custom Nib Studio. And this is a journaler nib, and the journaler is my favorite nib grind. Now, I love the grind. I do have the journaler ground on 2 different nibs. This one is the first one that I had done. And then the second one I had done was on my Black Rabbin skateboard pen. The Japanese medium is a little bit of a smaller tipping size, so it is a little bit smaller of, the final result. You can tell just barely that you started with a smaller nib tipping point to begin with, but the look and feel of it generally is the same. But I would definitely say Journaler is my favorite nib grind, with 2 pens currently with that grind in my collection. Have really been enjoying it. And a big shout out to Gina. It was my first pen show, didn't really know how all that stuff worked, and I walked up to their table at the very beginning of the very first day, because their sign-up sheet was already completely full, and they were super generous to make some time for me at the end of that day, so I was able to get that pen ground, and it has been such a nice experience. So here I'm going to say the Journaler nib. By Gina Salarino. Question number 7. If you could only use one ink for the rest of your life, what would it be? And I find this question to be pretty challenging, because one thing I really like about the fountain pen experience is the ability to switch out different inks you could essentially have one pen and have a lot of different inks, and you have a tremendous variety in a writing experience just with one pen. And so it's hard for me to kind of narrow down what one ink I would want to use for the rest of my life. But I'm going to give you my, this is the ink that I am currently very locked in on. I love this ink. This would not be my number 1 ink, the one that I would say is my all-time forever, but I want you to understand kind of why I love this ink, and why this decision is hard for me. So I'm going to do 2 teeny tiny ink swatches. I will do this one. Whoops, get a little more. Okay, This is the runner-up. And if it weren't for this other ink, this would have been the one. So this is Kyo No Oto Adzukiiro. Let's give this a little bit of a smudge here so you can kind of see what we're looking at here. And this is such a beautiful ink. It is, it's like a red kidney bean. And I love it. It is what I have used to write out these questions. It is such a beautiful ink. It is very flowy, and I have a lot of fun with this ink. It's so nice. It's so nice. And so that would be, if it weren't for this ink, that would be the one. And this is Sailor Zare Gokuro. And this ink was recommended to me by a person at Goods for the Study in downtown Manhattan. Sailor Zare Gokuro. And this one I like because of how it looks as it dries. So this one, let me just do a little bit of a smudge there for you, a little ink sample. And let me pull this up a little bit so that you can see it as it starts to dry. And I'm not certain if you'll be able to tell this, but it changes colors as it dries, and I find that to be just so beautiful. So this would be the answer to the, if you could only use one ink for the rest of your life, what would it be? It would be Sailor Zare Gokuro. Because it's amazing. Question number 8. What is an absolute deal breaker for you, for a pen or for an ink? Now, for the pen, I would say if the pen is hard to blank. So if the pen is hard to open, if it's hard to hold, if it's hard to get the angle right in order to write with it, if it's hard to integrate into my daily life, if it's hard to do any of the things that I would look for my pen to do, then that's going to be the deal breaker for me. Because really, for me, no matter how beautiful the pen is, my collection is small and it's really focused on usability and enjoyment and expanding the joy that I find with my existing collection. So I don't have an expensive collector's collection. I have a user's collection, and the pens that I have in my collection have to serve that main purpose of something that I'm going to be able to grab for and use and not have to worry about, is it posted correctly? Is it hard to reach for? Do I have to hold it a certain way? Because, I live in a small apartment in New York City and I don't have a lot of storage for things that I don't use. Now, in terms of ink, for me, really, it's just comes down to a couple of things. If the ink is illegible, like if I can't read it, I don't want to have to find just the right pen for it, because I probably don't have just the right pen for it. I want to be able to use my pen and ink pairings without having to overly fuss over an ink, or if it's poorly behaved, like if it feathers a lot or if it stays wet for an exceedingly inordinate amount of time. That's also not something that I'm interested in. And then the final question, the bonus question: what is one pen that everyone should have? And this question, oh, you know what? Hang on. Let me write this down. For the pen, I'm going to say hard to incorporate into daily use. And for the ink, poorly behaved. And the pen that everyone should have, I think it's a TWSBI. I think it's a TWSBI, and I actually think it's a TWSBI Eco. Now, this pen is currently permanently inked. This is inked with a Diatramentis Document Black. This is a 1.1 stub, and I probably wouldn't recommend a stub nib to people right out of the gate, but I would say that this pen is really, it's got a large ink chamber just like other TWSBIs do. The price point is really reasonable. Now, it does have some cracking issues on the body. Some people have experienced cracking issues on the body or on the grip, or sometimes maybe on the cap. I've not had any issues with my TWSBI at all, and this is one of the very first pens that I purchased, and I think it's great. I think it is an easy price point to bring into the collection. And it's a really easy pen for you to see if you enjoy fountain pens. If you have bought a TWSBI fountain pen and you don't love it, you're not out $100 or $200, or, the price point can go up much more than that. You're out a reasonable amount of money I think it's a very enjoyable writing experience. It stays the nib does not dry out because of the capping mechanism. And listen to this sound. I mean, who doesn't love that sound? So thank you so much for watching this video, and I had a really great time going through these questions and thinking about my responses, and hopefully you found something interesting about either my collection or my answers, or just about this pen tag in general. I'm going to say TWSBI Eco here. And that's it, folks. Have a good one. Bye.